I don't know how much time you got, but that is a hell of a question. It's a very complex answer.
Okay.
And I'm probably going to catch a lot of hell for, what I say, but these are my opinions. I'm going to say that
Okay.
right now. These are my
We'll,
opinions.
we'll edit
Um,
it.
yeah.
Hey, Corey, I'm super excited. Thank you so much for being on my podcast today.
Hey,
I
Eric.
see that.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no worries. I see that you're in sunny California today. The sun is still out. I'm in the East Coast, so it's nice and dark. First of all, just want to start off with COVID-19. We're all staying safe, right? We're all staying in.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so what has that been like? How are you staying sane? Do you have a workout regimen? How does that work?
Well, for me, this honestly hasn't been that big of a disruption. I've been working from home now for the last like 10 years. So the big thing for me is having the whole family home now. And my wife, she'll work, 1 week at home and 1 week at work. So
Right.
for me, it's just kind of making those little, I used to go out almost every day doing little grocery, store runs and whatnot. But now it's, maybe go out one day a week, get everything I can, bulk buy, and then when it comes time to being home, the kids and I, we just go play in the backyard. Today we just kind of did some skateboarding. My daughter and I will go jog, a couple days a week. And, the fitness stuff, we tried it for a while. I actually do personal training at a gym. And when California locked everything down, we just stopped doing that. So we just kind of do some basic stuff at home. Nothing too big.
Yeah, now you have kids. Is it okay if we talk about them at
Yeah.
all? Like,
Yeah,
are
sure.
they okay? Are they older now? Are they doing virtual learning at school,
Oh,
online, or
man.
how?
So the thing that breaks my heart the most is my oldest is 18 and he's a senior in high school. And, for obvious reasons, there's no prom,
Mm,
there's going to be no graduation. And, when, he played 4 years of high school football, he was a 3-year varsity starter. And, when I hear about the class of 2020 not being able to participate in the things that all of us got to participate in, the rites of passage before he goes off to college, it's devastating when you think about it. And then I have 13-year-old twins, boy and a girl,
wow.
and they're in seventh grade. They're just doing what seventh graders do. To them, yeah, they're home, but their school decided to go to a pass-fail system, so it's not like they're excited. They don't have to worry too much, and so the big thing was for my oldest son.
Yeah, it's got to be tough. I mean, 18 years old, that's a pivotal, moment in your life. But I guess the blessing in disguise is that you finally get to spend time with your boy, right? I mean, normally when you're 18, the last thing he or she wants to do is be home with dad and mom, right? So now that you kind of have that forced interaction, that forced love, as it were, I mean, there's some sweet moments there.
Yeah, it's really good. Part of what I do for a job is I'm gone, and they are my children by my first marriage. So for over 10 years now, we've been 50-50 custody. So it's always been a balance of when I'm gone, sometimes it's my weekend, and it's not that I'm just missing a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's I'm gone for 5 days, so I miss that time. So now that we're home, absolutely, we get a lot more time together. I'm very fortunate in that my children are kind of homebodies. They do like to go out and do stuff, but for the most part, we all just kind of hang out on the couch. We watch movies together, and so it's just been nice, and not having to travel during this period has actually been really good because, like you said, a lot of us, we just spend more time hanging out with each other.
Right.
So
Yeah. Now, talking about work, I did look you up, and I found your little series called Hunting. No, what was
the
it?
super hunting super
Yes,
bikes.
hunting superbike. That's it. I'm like, that's an Australian accent, but not a true Australian accent. So I'm like,
Oh, it's absolutely terrible. Yeah.
Oh,
That whole thing was just was more the product of just being bored one day. I was a big fan of the Crocodile Hunter growing up, and everybody's always had these memes of, what to do, and it was the preseason test at Barber, I believe it was in 2018, and I was bored. It was freezing cold.
yeah.
I don't know if you've been to Barber.
Everybody tells me Barber is cold. It's either it's cold or it's raining.
It's the track is amazing and it's beautiful and the facilities are the best in the world, but the experience is sometimes some of the worst you'll ever have.
Right.
As a photographer, as a fan or a rider, it's probably the best. But yeah, I was just bored and I was back there. There's this one little section where they've got this little display of like ants eating some rider who crashed. And so I'm back there trying to get this shot of this. It's a backside shot going up the hill with the tower on the side. I think anybody who's familiar with like Brian J. Nelson's photography or what Moto America's putting out from Barber, it's one of the classic shots. And they called the session. It was a little bit early. It was a little bit wet and damp. So I'm just kind of in the North 40 of the track. And I was just like, what am I going to do here? I am bored out of my skull. So, I just kind of started walking around with my phone going, yeah, what we got here is we got this, be quiet. I'm looking for super bikes. And it was just something stupid. And, I'm one of these people where I never want to offend anybody,
right.
And maybe that's just my upbringing. And the minute I put it out, I thought immediately I was going to offend the New Zealand guys that are in the track, and they came up later and like, oh man, no, just keep doing it, mate. It's great. Just loving it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then it just became a thing and I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. My favorite so far is the porta potty.
Oh my gosh.
That was pretty funny.
Oh my gosh. I got to tell you, I know we're going to wander a little bit, but porta johns are the bane of my existence. And I don't, when I talk to other photographers, whether they're in, BSB or World Superbike or MotoGP,
right.
We all have the same gripes. And it doesn't really matter, but it's always, why can't you just put signage on these things? You put them right next to the track where the flagging stations are, right where everybody has to take a shot, and every shot. And like Road America is one of these ones where Road America is a playground. It is a paradise for doing, photo and video work. But every corner has freaking porta johns in. And so I figured, what the hell, might as well have fun with it. Here's a true example of some of the things that we got to work around, so.
Yeah. So when I was watching the video the first time, I thought it was going to be, when the racer really needs to go, he or she has the ability to just hop off the bike, do their business, and it's basically a penalty lap, right?
Yeah, right.
Like a pit. You got to go to the pit. Okay, go to the porta john.
Well, unless you're Valentino Rossi, I think he did that when he was on the 125s, maybe. But yeah, hey, a little known fact is a lot of guys, right on the grid. JD Beach is one of these guys. It's just a nervous energy. I don't know if you did sports when you were growing up or whatnot. You get that kind of last minute, oh man, I really got to take a wheeze. And JD will be one of those first guys. He hops off the bike and he runs right across the grid, over the walls, finds the porta john right there, and he goes. And yeah, it's kind of funny you should say that because there are guys that will do that. Not on the cool down lap, but.
Well, yeah, no, and I get this with podcasts. I get very nervous right before the start, and yeah, I feel like I have to pee, but I'll hold it in.
You're doing great, man. It's just a conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I actually also caught the 5-minute clip of Hanging with the Haze.
Oh, yeah.
What is the inspiration? And, I mean, now with COVID-19, it's pretty much stopped production, right? So talk to me about that.
Well, that's an interesting project. It's pretty topical. It just came out today. And this was part of what we were discussing earlier on before we started recording was, what were you doing when all this COVID-19 stuff started happening? And I was actually on the road with the Hazes. I had flown into Barber, and the point was initially just going to be, working with Josh and Melissa and just kind of getting people up to speed on what they're doing, kind of doing this road to Daytona thing. Right. Because I don't know if you're familiar with Josh's history with Daytona. It's a mixed bag of success, right? He won it, was DQ'd, but still he stood on the box, stood on the top box. So he takes that as a win, regardless of what happens. Right. And then ever since, when they switched it back to the 600s to getting off the 1000s, it's just been so close and not there. So we wanted to do this big road to Daytona. What is Josh going to do at Daytona this year? So starting in Barber, and then we were going to film the 2 days at Barber and then drive down in his motorhome to Daytona and then film all that. And hopefully, we could come away with a victory, or if nothing else, a really good story again. And so that was really kind of the inspiration. And then obviously what ended up happening with the outbreak of the coronavirus was, as I said before, I'm sitting in the media center. We had done 2 sessions on, I think it was the races on Saturday, so it was Friday. It was Friday morning, and we had done the first 2 morning sessions. And I'm sitting in the media center trying to edit, getting some video, downloaded, and they made the announcement. Hey,
Wow.
we're shuttling everything down, and we're going to try to postpone it to October. And so immediately it was on a phone with Yamaha going, okay, here's what I got. I filmed maybe 1 session of him on the R6 at Barber, and I filmed maybe 2 sessions of him on the R1 for Westby Racing because Matthew Skoltz was injured.
Right.
And I said, so our whole Barber story was a wash. That never really happened. And then the drive down, we drove down so late at night that essentially we drove all night from Alabama to Florida and tried to film Josh, as he was driving at like 2 a.m. and then 1 session at Daytona. So
Yeah.
we decided to change up the storyline and make it this Hangin with the Hazes, which is, they've got a 2-year-old son, Hawk, who's amazing. And Josh and Melissa are probably the most genuine people that you will come across in the paddock.
Mm.
And being a fan for so many years, and then finally getting to work in the paddock, I'll never forget the first time I sat down and had lunch with Josh. I was like, oh my God, I'm sitting here, this is Josh Hayes. What am I doing here? This is crazy. And now I'm sleeping in his RV, filming his kids and, hanging out with everybody and you just realize that Josh and Melissa just have people that gravitate towards them.
Mm.
And so then it became this whole kind of, well, I've got a lot of this family footage. Can we do something with that? And I can't say for certain whether or not we're going to go back and finish in October. If it does, but there is one more clip coming out. There should be coming out for Daytona. And so, it morphed from this road to Daytona championship to, let's see what the family's like. And it turns out it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's the best way to present to the world, as famous as these guys are. At the end of the day, they're just regular people like you and me, right? So
Oh,
I think that's very cool. What I wanted to ask from a technical standpoint is, it's 5-minute clip on YouTube, but how much, pre-production, how much setup was there just to get those 5 minutes clip? I mean, it must be, hours and hours of tape, or did you get it all in one shot?
Oh man, what are you talking about? I'm so solid. I get everything done. I'm a one and done Charlie. I get out of there.
Exactly.
No, I'm a very paranoid person when it comes to production. I want to make sure that we've got everything that we're supposed to do. So I had my shot list. So you spend about a week setting everything up. I spend 2 days prior to the trip, making sure that all my equipment's working, that I have everything in my Pelican cases. Because, once you walk out the door, some of the equipment that I have is very, I'm not shooting on Reds, but I'm shooting on some Sonys, and I'm using some other equipment that requires a very specific, like media format, for example, in the hard drive. And I only have one of those hard drives. So I got to make sure it works every time. And anyway, so I spent about a week. And as a matter of fact, before I left, I was actually supposed to shoot the XFL game, the Wildcats and the Vipers, and I didn't know that was ever going to be the last game they would ever play.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, when we show up and we get on site, I start, the first thing that I do is I take my list, I look it over, crumble it up, throw it away, because it never goes the way you plan it.
Right.
And, of course, we show up at Barber, it's pouring down rain, it's cold, it's Barber in March. It's just the way it's going to be. And so you got to work with what you got. You have an idea of what you want this to be, and you have to shoot those shots. And so in this particular case, that's kind of what I did as I was shooting with this idea of still doing this road to 200,
Right.
and then trying to capture the little golden moments, not thinking, with his family, not thinking that those moments would be the entire video. And so then when it comes down to actually making the video, you've got to work with what you actually shot. And
Right.
the story that I shot wasn't the story that I ended up with. And when you're interviewing Josh and you're doing these things, you have to try to ask the questions as backups and say, okay, we were here to do this, but we did this. So let's talk about what we were here to do, and then let's talk about what we did. So that way, when you cut up the interview, you have this idea, okay, we can talk a little bit about this and a lot about that, or vice versa. For me, I'm about a 3-to-1 shooter. So for every 1 day of shooting, it's about 3 days of editing. That's kind of how you generally look at it. I'm one of these people, though, that I have to like walk around and I have to think about it for a long time. I have to develop what I really want. And then it's probably like a good solid 12 hours of just laying out the timeline, laying out the interview that we did, making sure that the sound bites are what I want. And then it's just dropping pieces in. So, pre-production, I'll probably spend a week prior to the shoot. And then after production, it's about, on this particular case, it was about 2.5 weeks.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, I've done some video editing myself, very amateurish. And I know that, literally a good 30-second shot could take you, for me, it takes me like a week to get it right. Just that last tiny pixel, right? Like you're making pixel perfect. So I can understand your pain and the process that it takes. And nobody, like people who are not in the industry, they see this video, they're like, oh, cool. And they're not paying attention. They're looking at their phone, not realizing the sweat and the pain and the arguments and everything you've done to get that particular shot. Yeah,
it's a bit interesting because we have two paradigms kind of going on, and I'm kind of glad you brought that up. Right now there's this school of thought that we should just put out hot clips, right? Get these things out, and I agree with that. We should have hot content. It's consumable. It's like candy. The people are going to look at Instagram, they're going to look at Twitter, and if they can watch it in 30 or 60 seconds, that's awesome. And I fully support those kinds of things. My problem was before this particular thing, and kind of where my story always goes, is that I love documentaries. I love telling stories.
Yeah.
And when, prior to doing this thing with Josh, when I was with the Road Race Factory for all those years, I looked at it as it's my job to tell the story of the team. We're there for 5 days. A lot of people don't understand that the team shows up on Wednesday and then they go home. They pack up on Sunday, but they're not getting home until Monday night.
Right.
And so that's 5 days. And to just throw out a 30-second clip for 5 days worth of work, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
What else happened? He went around a corner 3 times. No. 5 days worth of things happened. An entire team. In our case with the Road Race Factory, at one point, we had I think we had 4 riders that we were paying, and then we had a 5th guy who was paying. And so I'm responsible for telling the story of this entire team. And they're in different classes and they're doing different things. And, it poured down rain on Friday, and then on Sunday it hailed, and then Sunday or, Saturday was beautiful. And you got to tell that story. And so that's where I come into this. And this whole thing with Josh Hayes, unfortunately, I watched that F1 Drive to Survive before going there. And so, in my head, I have all these, like Fellini type, shots. I'm like, oh, we do some noir work, it's in black and white, and do, no. I gotta keep telling myself, nope, pull it back in, be more realistic.
Right. Now, I did do a little bit of research on your history. You have what I think to be quite an amazing and eclectic line of work and different roles, right? Which I'm all about that. I'm all about, learning different things, doing different jobs. And one of the things I found out was you were the media director for a racing team. Escapes me which team it was.
That was the Road Race Factory.
Road Race Factory, right. What was that like? What were the biggest challenges you had in that role?
All right. What it was like, man, it's like being in a dysfunctional but loving marriage.
Right. That's gotta be fun.
It is. Danny Walker, he was the team principal at the time. Actually, he's the only team principal of that team, and he is a strong personality, and he's one of these people that will put together the best of the best to achieve a goal. And bringing me in with absolutely no experience was a crapshoot. And, to be honest, he didn't even want me in the beginning because I came with the truck. They had just purchased the trailer. I knew the guy who owned the trailer. I had just gotten laid off. So he's like, go with the trailer. And Danny was like, I don't want this guy. I don't want this guy. And I slowly started building up and saying, hey, Danny, how come we don't have a Facebook page? How come we don't have this? How come we don't have that? And he just said, eventually he's like, okay, fine, you do it. And took it over. And over the years, it was the best experiences of my life. I think, I think coming into a racing paddock as an unknown person who then gets to spend all this time living with these people who this is not just their job, this is their passion, this is everything they got. And what that did for me is, going back to what I said earlier, is I said, that's where I really developed the sense of, okay, my job as a media director isn't just to make sure that my rider's where he needs to be for the radio interviews and our press kits look good and our Facebook page, but it's to tell the story. And in order to tell the story, you got to get to know the guys, and you have to ingrain yourself with them. And sometimes you get a little too close, but at the same time, you have to kind of leave that distance, because sometimes things go bad. And when things go bad, you have to be free to report that. You have to be free to say that. Because in my view, I think what draws fans in is that connection, right? If all they ever see is, Jake Gagne, this surfer boy from California with his blonde hair blowing in the breeze, that's a little bit shallow after a while, right?
Right.
What happens between JD and Jake? What happens between, Yamaha and, the factory Yamaha and us? These are things that a lot of people aren't privy to, but I am. I got big ears, so I'm listening to everything, and it's my job to make sure. And I love it. And I think when the team disbanded, it hurt. It hurt a lot. I know, and I still keep in touch with Danny quite a bit. I still work with his American Super Camp. So, that relationship is still there. And I know Scotty, our crew chief, he's over now with HSBK, or Celtic HSBK. And Evan is now, I think, with, KWR. And we got Danny Anderson. He's now with Westby. So the family's still there. They just have different homes. And, yeah.
Yeah. I just thought of something. It's kind of a little bit of a tangent, but maybe not so much. I remember first of all, I'm a casual race fan at best, okay? I only really get to now watch MotoGP, and I don't even watch it live. I don't have a subscription. So I kind of hear about it, read about it after the fact, after the race is over, and I watch clips. That being said, I still follow it to some degree. And one of the things I've noticed is, if you're not top 5, top 10, I don't hear from you, right? The only time I hear from you or see your logo or see your sponsor is that pre-race, when they're on the grid and they're, hi, can I interview you? And you're like the 15th guy, which is fine, but like that's the only exposure he has to TV, right? To the rest of the population. So for a casual fan, I'm never going to hear about the sponsor. I'm not going to hear, why they're being sponsored, right?
Right.
And let me quickly, I'll turn to you. So this seems to be a phenomenon with the rest of the motorcycle racing industry. Is that true in America? And what's your take on that, and how do we fix that?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, because that is actually something that's really near and dear to me. A lot of people just think I'm a photographer, or I just do video work, and they just kind of dismiss it. But, at the end of the day, being a PR media guy for a team is what I really valued the most, because it became my job, and it is the job of the PR person to take care of those sponsors. One of the things that I look at today, and I don't know if it's a problem or if it's part of, what's the right word? It's a symptom as opposed to the actual problem, but it is in respect to that, where I think a lot of teams, they just focus on trying to win. And so they spend all of their money on, throwing down $100,000 into a motorcycle and trying to get it on track, get the best parts. And that's great. But if you're fighting outside of the top 3 in some cases, 5 in most cases, you're right. You're not going to get any of that press. You're not going to get any of that. You're what's called an also ran, right? And that is something that riders never want to be called. It's something that teams never want to be a part of, or a grid filler. But that's the truth of the matter. So it becomes the team's responsibility to promote themselves, to promote their sponsors. And one of the things that I really valued as being a PR person was making sure that I worked with the sponsors to highlight what it was that they were doing. So if it was like Akrapovic, for example, the exhaust manufacturer, we had a Czech guy on our team. It's a Czech company. So why not make a video with him correcting the way we say it? Because we say it all wrong. So, we did this big video for Akropovic, and then I cut to him with this big, strong, Eastern European Akropovic, and it goes over really well. And like with Broaster Company, people go, why do you want chicken sponsoring your team? Who cares who's sponsoring the team? They're writing a check that allows us all to do this. And if you don't give them the value back, they're not going to continue to write that check. Yep. So who cares who the sponsor is? They wrote the check. They need to see that their money has value. And if you're outside of the top 5 and you're not going to get TV time, what do you do? So I used to make TV commercials for Broaster, so like, it was always a last minute thing, but we would get to like Road Atlanta and they'd say, hey, we need a 30-second ad or a 60-second ad that's going to go on the Jumbotron and it's going to be aired live. What do you do? So I'd get, Jake, and I'd have him, looking like he's frying up some chicken, and, we do the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And I can send you a link to that. That was fun.
Yeah,
but that's where I think people really need to start looking again, is not so much, you're not going to beat, Tony, and you're not going to beat, Cam and Jake and those guys unless something really happens. So I think again this year, and it's not a knock on this, it's not a knock on the series, it's just reality of the situation. They have the money. And if it's a snow day or something like that, maybe somebody else that you wouldn't expect is going to beat them.
Right.
But where you win as a team is you win in sponsorship dollars.
Yeah.
And you got to spend the money to get the money, and how you spend that money shouldn't be in a set of rear sets. You shouldn't have 60 pairs of rear sets. If you need 60 pairs of rear sets, maybe you need to take a look at who's riding the bike. Why you keep ruining our rear sets, and hire somebody who is a PR person to take care of the sponsors, to make sure that you have lasting relationships to then continue to build that team. And that's what we did with Road Race Factory is, we had Red Bull right out of the gate, but that was more, we took a helmet sponsorship and kind of morphed it into the bike. And after a while, even Red Bull was like, Superbike racing wasn't Red Bull's thing. They're more into, jumping out of a helicopter with a mountain bike and, shooting down Mount Everest on a one ski and doing all crazy stuff. Yeah. So when we got Broaster, it was more about, let's take care of Broaster and who on the team is going to do that. Because if they're paying, let's just say $100,000,
sure,
and you're not getting TV time, where is their money being spent?
Yeah.
So you have to highlight your sponsors. You have to highlight the value that they're bringing to the team. And that's what a PR person's, one of the many jobs that a PR person has to do.
It's funny that we're on this topic. I actually just talked to a friend of mine the other day. He's all about NASCAR. Okay. I know nothing about NASCAR. I don't follow sports. And he's like, well, the NASCAR model is that, I don't know if you're aware of the NASCAR model, by the way. It's you get 40 teams. Okay. I'm throwing a number, 40 teams, and you get 30 races or 40 races. But after 30 races, they look at the top 15 guys, and the top 15 guys are eligible to win the championship. Everybody else still races, they're still allowed to win that race, but only those top 15 guys gets to be in the championship. And when they get to the last 10 races, those top 15, they kind of reset to 0. And then again, it's a point system, but only for the last 10 races. It's kind of like a playoff. Right. I said, that's pretty interesting. I go, what happens to the guys who consistently run in the last third of the grid? And his answers were simple. He goes, either you do better, step up, stop being a little girl and step up, or stop being a little boy and step up, or you got to have a big crash. Because that is the only way you're going to get attention, right? If you're in a big crash, you're in everybody's mind for those 2 weeks. You're in every interview. You're on every clip. And I said, but you can't have that in motorcycle racing. I go, with the car, I can kind of rebuild the car. I can't afford to rebuild my bike every third week, right? So how can this problem be solved?
I don't know, because until people start hitting the right notes, I don't know how the money's coming back into the series. And I know, there's maybe only, I would venture to say there's probably only 3 guys in the paddock right now that are actually being paid to ride.
Wow.
And everybody else has to bring something to the party. And I may be wrong. There may be more, and I'm not aware of it.
Sure.
but I am aware of a lot of people that have what they call personal sponsors, right? So you have, your team sponsors, and then what do you as a rider bring? Sometimes certain teams like Hammer has, the new Suzuki team, they have leather sponsors, and there's a conflict with Tony because Tony has a sponsorship with Alpenstar. So who wins that one? But if you're, like you're saying, if you're down in like 10th place or whatnot, you're not running on Alpenstars because they're not giving you a suit. You're paying off the rack prices for that. And I don't know what the magic number, I don't know what the magic bullet is. I think it's I think it just comes down to, being smart with the money that you have, promoting not just yourself, because sometimes riders, look, they all build a following, and every single one of them is a type A guy. Every single one of them is going to win the MotoGP champion, every single one of them. But I think the realistic ones understand that it's a business, and they work to foster those relationships. And I look at some of the guys that are down grid who have had the same sponsor, for almost 10 years. And it's because they have that relationship. Right. And they say, okay, look, the sponsor can't afford to give me money, but they're giving me product. So if, say, for example, like Evil Technology, they make amazing things. And I'm not saying that this is what they do, but, some riders, they get a discounted price, or maybe they get a product sponsorship, for a bigger logo on the bike. So, I don't have that answer necessarily, but I think there's a couple things that they can do.
Yeah, I look at bike racing today, and I'm not ashamed, but I'll be the first to admit I'm from Canada. We have a Canadian Superbike racing series that I haven't followed since maybe 1998.
Oh man, right? Ben Young, come on, he's my boy.
But the only guy I know from anything Canadian related was Jordan Zokes. Yeah. Right. Okay. Jordan Zokes. Okay. So, my point is, I don't follow it a lot for kind of obvious reasons, right? In Canada, most of the places are cold. Okay. I know you're nice and sunny in the background. We snowed this morning. Okay. So it's cold. We don't have a large population in Canada to begin with, right? And then on top of that, there aren't that many tracks that are in good shape. And in fact, today, before we started the show, I went and prepped, and I looked around, and I said, there's only 6 races a year. I think that's how many it was before. But now it's like the same track in 2 of the races. So they start at Shannonville, they end in Shannonville. And so really there's only 5 more tracks. And out of those 5 tracks, 2 of them are still in Ontario. So really it's like the Ontario race is the Ontario Superbike racing with a couple of like stops in Nova Scotia and I think Saskatchewan, right? My point is, it's very easy to understand why there's not a large following in Canada for Canadian Superbike races, right? But why not in the States? I mean, you look at this classic example of boxing versus kickboxing, okay? Everybody watches boxing to some degree, right? If you're an 80s kid or a 90s kid, everybody watched Mike Tyson when he was on a card, right? But arguably, kickboxing is more entertaining. You're not just using your fist. There's 8 points of weapon, right? Like you got knees, you got elbows, blah, blah, blah. And yet it never took off in the States. Now, if you look at motorcycle racing, and not because I like bikes and I ride a bike, but to me, it's hella interesting, right? You see the positioning, you can see the nervous energy on the guys right before they start the race that you don't always get in other motorsport racing. So why hasn't motorcycle racing caught on in the States? Or why isn't it bigger than it is now?
That is I don't know how much time you got, but that is a hell of a question. It's a very complex answer. Okay. And I'm probably going to catch a lot of hell for, what I say, but these are my opinions. I'm going to say that right now. These are my opinions.
We'll edit it.
Yeah. The series took a decline when DMG purchased it, Daytona Motorsports Group. In my opinion, they were, it was in a decline when it was purchased, and I think they drove the final nail in the coffin. And since then, it's been Moto America's responsibility, or it's not their responsibility, but is obviously something that they are working to try to bring back. And I tip my hat to everything that they're doing over there, the Crave Group, and how they're trying to establish more in Moto America. But I think the problem that they're facing is that there's just too many other options. There's too many other things to get our attention. You know, here in the States, you know, I think we have collective ADD when it comes to stuff. And, you know, oh, look, a chicken, you know, we all go chase it. And, you know, it leaves little room, if any, for traditional superbike racing. And I think you see a lot of the things that Moto America is trying to do. I don't necessarily agree with, but I understand what they're doing. So, you know, they're having the bagger class this year, which is kind of a throwback to when we used to race Harleys, you know, when we are still DMG. But I just think it boils down to there's too many other options. And once DMG chased out the factories, once Honda, Kawasaki, those guys finally said, you know, I'm out. I'm not, the rules, we can't do this. And that's when Yamaha stepped in, and they stayed as the only real factory. You know, Yoshimura Suzuki stayed as well, but Yamaha was really the driving force. And Yamaha was able to, you know, help make the rules and all that good stuff. So this is why we had such a dominant Yamaha series for so long. And then everybody else was trying to play catch up. Last year I had the benefit of working in American Flat Track and with the Estison racing team. And I got to tell you, you know, there was never an empty seat in any of the circuits that we went to. And I mean, we're talking Springfield, you know, which is a fairgrounds that, you know, can fit, you know, I don't want to make up a number, but a lot of people. And every track we went to, it didn't matter where it was, whether it was in Lima, Ohio, or like I said, Springfield, Illinois, or, you know, Sacramento. They were full. They were just full. And I think it's because it's a one-day event. You know, you show up at 5 o'clock just in time for, you know, sprint race or, you know, heat races. You grab your beers, you grab your hot dogs, and you just sit down, and in about 3 to 4 hours time, you're done. You're done. Superbike racing, as I said earlier, it's a 5-day-a-week event. And, you know, fans coming in on Thursday, if they want to walk the paddock, they don't necessarily have to pay an entrance fee, but on Friday they got to start paying. And who wants to pay to go watch guys practice, you know?
Right.
And so I think it's just a combination of a lot of different things. And I really feel that Moto America is doing a great job. And I'm not a shill. I don't work for Moto America. But, you know, I think that they're really doing everything they can, and they're trying to establish pipelines. I think it starts with the next generation. If we can get some younger riders in. So this year they've got the Mini Cup. If we go racing this year, they've got the Mini Series. Then they've got the juniors. They got the twins class. They're doing the baggers as an exhibition. And so all of these things are trying to, like, hey, look, the fans are still there. The industry is suffering. But if you look at the different market segments, baggers, cruisers are still doing really well in terms of sales. Adventure bikes are doing way better than anybody else right now. So you got to try to bring those fans in. So you got to try to throw something at them that is going to entice them to come back in. And I think that, you know, they're doing what they can, but there's a magic bullet out there. And if we knew it, I think we'd all be millionaires and raking it in again, but I don't know. Because the show is great. I don't know if you said you're a casual fan, and I've only seen a handful of the Canadian races because I do know Ben Young. He's a great guy. But the racing on the track is the best it's probably been. The top 3, top 4 in Moto America. I mean, if you watched anything last year, these guys are throwing elbows, going into corners and bumping people. I mean, it is fantastic.
Right.
Doesn't get the draw. So it's like, what are you doing? What do we got to do?
I wonder if it makes sense to have something like The Ultimate Fighter, where you get a group of guys, right?
Right.
And it's one bike, okay? It's your bike ride of the year. You got 12 guys in there, throw them in a house, and then you see who comes out on top. Would that help? I mean, again, what you're saying in the very beginning was loving to tell that personal story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really the only way you can attract fans today. Right? Yeah. There's really, again, what you're saying again, there's only 2 types of people. Either you're this 30, 60-second type of person who does one of these, right? Mm-hmm. Or you're the guy who can sit there and listen to a 3-hour podcast. It's either or. And I think the people who are listening to or watching long-form television program still exist. I mean, how many people have burnt through Tiger King in a day, right? I mean, so it exists. Right? Yeah. My point is, is there a place for reality TV to exist for American motorcycle racing?
Oh, I definitely think there is. But that has to come down to the production company that is working with Moto America. I think that's instead of being a production company that just sets up cameras on the track and does the 1970s style of sports broadcasting, which is what the industry, and it's not just motorcycle racing, it's every sports industry. Only certain industries have really started to change it. And I think with like the NFL bringing in the Sky Cam, that the camera that zips around the field, that's a new thing. That's pretty interesting. But with the reality TV, and if you wanted to compare it to something like UFC or whatnot, telling those personal stories is what's important. And if you look at like Conor McGregor, why do we like Conor McGregor so much? Even though he's been beat, right? He got beat, but he's a trash talker, but he backs it up, and he's just flamboyant, and you can just love him. And even when he loses, people still lose their minds over what he does, as opposed to somebody who just kind of comes in there quietly, knocks a bunch of people around and gets out. There's those stories. And I think the people that tell their own story the best, with the help of the production companies, with the help of, the series to highlight it, that's where you get it.
All right. So what I'm hearing is that you're now going to pitch this series to Netflix. You're going to do a 7-part docu-series.
I would love it. It'd make my day. And and the thing is, we've got personalities, and I guess I apologize. I wander. My brain, I'm chasing chickens all the time in my brain. But you mentioned something that was pretty important, which is the personalities. And there are a lot of personalities in the sport. I think what we're coming up, though, is we're coming up onto a problem where we no longer allow our athletes to really say what's on their mind, because they get penalized. Those of us that work in the series, myself included, we're afraid to levy any kind of criticism because they hold my credential. I could show up, I could say something wrong on this podcast that they don't agree with. I get to the next race and my credential's been pulled.
Wow. And
so you have this fear. I'm not saying they will do that, but there's this fear that they'll do that. There's this fear among the athletes that I have to be this partisan, or not partisan, but I have to walk the party line. And when you look at somebody like Josh Herrin, let's just take him as a perfect example. And Josh, I love you. This is nothing about you. I think we're going to highlight you as what's going right. He speaks his mind. And whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you agree with it or not, he says what he feels in the moment, and that's truth. That's honesty. And yeah, sometimes you got to walk it back, but sponsors and teams are having difficulty with it because they're trying, because they want to go this way with it. And they got somebody like Josh, who is hands down one of the better racers, but sometimes he says things and people get really reactionary, and he gets punished. When I first came into the paddock, it was Danny Eslick. Danny Eslick was the personality. It was larger than life, the stories and everything like that. And we would have the greatest time. As soon as that red light came on to start talking about it, oh man, it's all good. Nothing. Come on, man. What are you talking about? And it's just this. And if you want to attract the people, I mean, look at how many people follow Josh Herrin. His social media profile is off the charts. And it's because he is who he is.
Yeah.
And I think people need to understand that. And I think people need to be okay with that. We need to stop looking at our sports, quote unquote, heroes as our guiding lights, as our moral compass. It's the same thing as like, why hook yourself to a politician? No. Mm-hmm. Hook your morals and your ethics to people that you like and agree with, and then enjoy the sport for what it is. Let athletes be who they are, and let us tell the story to help you bring these people in. Because I promise you that if you let Josh Herrin off the hook and just let him be him, yeah, he's going to piss a lot of people off, but he's also going to make you a lot of money.
Yeah, you know what? As you were talking, I was just thinking of a meme I saw, I think yesterday. The top panel is President Trump saying, "I promise you that and I'm paraphrasing, every man and woman will get some kind of help, financial help." And then the next panel is Forrest Gump going, and now all of a sudden we're back to only 2 genders.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right. So I think one of the things that I'm learning through this, the coronavirus that's happening. And by the way, because I'm from Canada, you're allowed to make fun of other people's culture as long as we're good friends. Okay, so you and I are good friends, so I have no problem. I was calling it the woohoo flu like the minute I heard Wuhan, right? So between you and me, I know I'm terrible. Between you and me, we're good. Okay, so we can make fun of each other, no problem. So the point is with the coronavirus, I mean, you've really learned that a lot of stuff that was happening like 3 months ago, nonsense, right? I don't need 80 different pronouns to figure out whether you're a male or female or you're gender fluid, right? I was at La Senza. It's like a lingerie shop in Canada with my wife.
Nice. Okay, good qualifier.
Anyway, she's buying stuff. Anyways, and she's like, do you want to come in and see? And I said, sure. And I walked in. And when I walked out, the lady goes, hey, stop. What are you doing? I go, what's wrong? She goes, you can't go in there. You're a guy. I said, no. I'm gender fluid for this next 5 minutes. I'm a girl, so you can't tell me I can't go in. I pissed her off. And that's kind of a jerk I am, right? But anyways, totally off topic.
No, that's great.
Yeah, my point is, I really think that, Moto America in the state, the way the races were last year, and I saw maybe a couple highlights. You're right. It was really intense racing, and the likes of probably hasn't happened in many years. Like MotoGP, like as much as I love MotoGP, I will listen in the car, right? I'll record a race. I'll listen in the car. And if it's not exciting, I'll just listen to it. Like I'm not even going to watch it because once whoever is ahead, the chances of anybody catching up, it's kind of slim and none, right? So, it's not as cool. Yeah. One of the things while research, again, we talked about how eclectic your life has been, how cool your jobs have been. Is it safe to say that you were at one time a rocket scientist?
I shy away from that. I'm not an engineer, but I worked for a company. I got hired in at the time. It was owned by Boeing, but it's a company called Rocketdyne. And we made rocket engines. We made the space shuttle main engines. We did the engines for the Delta II rockets, the Delta IV rockets, and worked with. We did the upper stage engines, RL10s. We did all kinds of, and even so much as I worked on the International Space Station. I didn't actually work on it. They didn't send me up there, but I worked down in Houston for what we call the TDY, like a temporary assignment. And spent a year of my life working out of the Boeing Houston and the what's called the Sonny Carter neutral buoyancy facility. It's the big swimming pool where we have large section, 1x1 scale sections of the space station that we could then run procedures on to validate our procedures for maintenance and assembly. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. I don't know where you want me to go with it, but if I had to pick a favorite thing, it would be the International Space Station.
Right.
Doing that project, and because I was one of these young guys, if you did the research and you went through my LinkedIn, you'd see that I got a bachelor's in political science. What in the hell am I doing working with astronauts, in the pool? And I used to say that to myself every day I woke up. I would wake up out of my little suite that they'd give me from down there, and I'd walk in, scan my badge, and it had a little NASA sticker on it, and you could smell the chlorine as you walk in, and you could see the suits and you could see the astronauts, and you just get all giddy, and then you'd spend 2 weeks working side by side with the astronauts who were actually going to fly the mission to validate your procedures. And I never in my life ever thought I'd ever get something to be that cool.
Yeah.
And it was just a dream. It's just a dream.
So do you have now one of my favorite movies, and the reason why I brought it up is because one of my favorite movies is Apollo 13.
Nice.
Right? Mm-hmm. Now I'm not a stats guy in racing, okay? I couldn't tell you how many races this person or that person has won. I'm just not that, okay?
Right.
And again, I seem to be a casual fan, but I'm a casual fan of a lot of things. So I like guys who have had different careers in their life, and that's why I like talking to you. But right back to my original point, one of my favorite movies is Apollo 13. Mm-hmm. What is your favorite space movie, if you have one?
Favorite space movie? Honestly, I think from a technical perspective, Apollo 13 is amazing, but I think in terms of actual story would be October Sky. I don't know if you saw that one.
I've not.
I wish I could remember the name of the gentleman. I haven't seen the movie in a very long time. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, so I got Battlestar Galactica, Expanse. I got all that bouncing around in my head, and I'm pushing real things down. But it was the story of a kid who grew up in a West Virginia coal mine, and in a coal town, and he was really into rockets, and he kept defying his father, saying, you're going to go work in the mine, you're going to go work in the mine, and this kid was just nope. And he kept launching rockets, launching homemade rockets, and next thing you know, he's one of the head designers or head engineers on the space shuttle program. Working for NASA. It's a true story, true as Hollywood can make it. And I think it's just a fantastic story of the improbable, because, we all come from different backgrounds, but sometimes you feel stuck in where you are. And here's a kid that was growing up in a coal mining town in the 60s who ended up being one of the head guys at NASA. He had no future, but he built it himself, and now he's there. And I love that story. And I think just that path, that arc, that story arc is what was really good.
Huh. Yeah, actually, one of my, maybe not favorite, but one of the recent movies I've seen is Hidden Figures. You know what it's about, Hidden Figures?
I do know what it's about, yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And that human aspect of the movie, again, as Hollywood and real as it can be, I really thought it was a great story, just about perseverance in space. I'm not a big sci-fi guy, right? But I've been wanting to watch Expanse. I just haven't had the time.
Oh, you owe it to yourself. Once you get past the first season, it's amazing. It's a slow burn, but the whole thing. The problem I have is when I watch really technical movies. Like when I saw The Martian. I read the book, and then we saw the movie, and the problems I have are the nerd problems, right? Like, oh, you could never do that. You can't just put a hole in your glove and fly around space because you've got one atmosphere of pressure in your suit. I'm that guy in the movie theater going, oh, bullshit. You can't do that.
Yeah, right.
And so, that's why I like the stories a little bit more. And then I leave if it's going to be sci-fi, I want it to be pure sci-fi. I want aliens. I want the whole 9 yards, but.
So why do you think we're so fascinated with space? I mean, here's my take, okay? We spend a lot of money for NASA, put somebody in space that's like circle around an International Space Station. But why? Are we going to be Elon Musk? We're really going to colonize Mars? Like, what is the fascination with space?
I think it's the last unknown, and it's a cliche, but I think, I'm one of these people that happens to believe that it's in our DNA. There are certain people, and I'm one of them, who thrive on exploration, thrive on adventure, thrive on that challenge. And I think as a race, there's nowhere really left to go. We really are, and I don't want to get too political, but we're making a mess of our house right now. And Lord knows what we're going to do later on in the future. Hopefully we figured it out. But I think space holds just a lot of this unknown. We have a lot of speculation. You can watch Ancient Aliens until your head explodes and you go, I don't know if I'm smarter. I don't know if I'm any dumber, but it's interesting. And I think, there's just a lot of this stuff. And I think we've also lost a lot of the connection with it. And again, it's kind of more and more of me being a softie, but city lights and whatnot, we can't look up and see the stars like we used to. So now we have to send satellites to go do it for us. And then every time we send up a new telescope and we get greater resolution and we're now finding more of these exoplanets, I think we're starting to realize that we are definitely not alone. And if we are, well, then doesn't that validate what half of the people in this world are saying anyway? Because there's those people that'll be like, we were made by one person in his image and we're the only things out there. We can prove that. They're not mutually exclusive, right? We're trying to do the same thing. And I think that's what it's all about. And I think it's all just about being able to see what's out there, see what's next. How far can we go? I think it's just a deep rooted desire to go out.
Yeah. So bring it back to motorcycle racing and you being a professional photographer. By the way, I want to say that your flat track pictures are some of the best.
Oh, thank you,
It
man.
really stands out when I look at your Instagram. Like I love the way you shot them. They're fantastic. The framing, the whole 9
Thank you.
yards.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's good. What's in your photo bag what is your favorite kit? And what's your gear today? What's that
Okay.
like?
All right. Well, if we're just talking photo and we're
Yeah.
not doing video, okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my workhorse, I have a Nikon D5. I have 2 bodies of that, and then I also have an older Nikon D750. I pretty much just use that when I shoot time lapses or when it's not my favorite camera because it's got some issues. So I use that one a lot for the slow shutter pans. Like if I drop it to less than 100th of a second, that's the camera I want to use. And it's also the camera that's almost always got a wide angle attached to it. Just again because it's not the higher performing camera. My favorite lens, my workhorse lens, is my 200 to 400 Nikon lens. I don't use any teleconverters or anything like that. I've never had good luck with teleconverters. My images always come out a little bit soft, and I think that's more of an image, more of a Nikon thing. I know a lot of Canon shooters who don't seem to have that problem. And so let's see. And then after that would be the 70 to 200. I've started using that less and less and dropping it down to more like a mid-size 24 to 70 lens. Just because it seems to be like that everyday lens. I can go right from the track to the podium with that lens and not have to change anything out, because one thing you don't want to do is, even though I've got 2 bodies and they're set up for different situations, there are some times when you're like, oh man, I got to change lenses, and you don't want to keep doing that. So you got to minimize how many times you're changing lenses.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I first got into photography, I would stand there for half an hour with with 2 lenses, and I would try to like switch them as quick as I could with my eyes closed, and it's a nightmare, right? It doesn't really work.
Yeah, you introduce a lot of debris. It's bad.
Yeah, especially if you're on trackside, right?
Oh yeah.
One of the things that I really respect about you right out of the gate, even before I met you, was the fact that you were able to run multiple successful business, seemingly, okay, on your timeline, seemingly, which is all you need. But how do you judge that? How do you go from photographer, a professional professional photographer to being the media guy and race team? How do you juggle between these different roles and manage to have a family at the same time?
I would say it's burnout. No, I'm just kidding. It like I said earlier, I have a lot of chickens in my head, and so each one of those things I get to chase. I have a really creative streak that I really enjoy doing, so I do graphic design as well. Like for the Road Race Factory, I designed the bikes every year. I did, I designed the trailer every year. I do shirts for teams that some people probably don't even know that's me that's doing them. And I do it just because it's more of a necessity. Like I look at things like, okay, this is everything that I've got to do. This is the role that I have to play. And those are the expectations. So I just have to try to meet the expectation. And then I try to exceed them as much as I possibly can. Sometimes for certain teams, I have to say, listen, if you want to do photo and video, I can't do both amazing. I can do photo amazing or I can do video amazing. What do we want to do? What's the focus? And if they say, well, we want to do more video, okay, great. So that means that I can knock it back and just kind of do stock photos for Facebook and make everybody happy with photos, give the riders their stuff, but then focus on the video. That's where I need to go. The press stuff kind of takes place because over the course of the weekend, the story just writes itself. Like I said, the first thing I do is I get out of the car, I take my plane, I throw it away, because week in and week out, you want to try to have you want to try to have a continuous story, but 9 times out of 10, it's not going to happen. So you got to throw that away and you just roll with it. And then having the family, I've been blessed with, an amazing wife who is super supportive of what I do. I mean, it causes her a lot of stress, when I'm gone. But at the same time, and the kids have just been great about it. They grew up with me in this thing. And so, yeah, we've missed a lot. I've missed birthdays and I never liked doing that. My kids will probably tell you my dad's a big softie. He sends us these big crying videos of him on the side of the track wishing me a happy birthday. Get over it, Dad. But that's just how it is. And I think I'm able to do it because I try to work with the best people. I don't like working with people that aren't upfront and honest about what they want. And my family is just amazingly supportive.
Wow, that's good to hear. I mean, it's definitely something I struggle with. I mean, this is a really really fun hobby, and obviously I hope that this goes well for everybody. But it's a hobby for now, and it already is very hard to judge between work life and home life. So it's great to see someone who's able to handle it. Seemingly being able to handle it.
Yeah,
really easily.
Well, I think one of the more interesting things was, people asked sometimes, because I haven't done the rocket thing since last year. I walked away from that. My contract ran out, and people say, well, how do you work a full-time job and then still go do this? And it's easy in the sense that I had been working with that company for years and years. And when they brought me back as a contractor. And I made it very clear right up front. I said, if you're bringing me back as a contractor, which I think is an amazing thing, I love it, then here's what I'm willing to do. And so we worked out a work schedule. And as long as I met the needs of that job, they were completely cool with me being gone for 5 days.
Wow.
It just meant I didn't get any time off. Like I would have to try to fly out on a Sunday so I could be at work by Monday morning, work that 40 hours, and then still try to produce videos at night when I got home. So I mean, it piled up, but
yeah, it's a grind.
It's a grind, but
I
think you just have to be willing. I think you have to be willing to be honest with yourself and what your capacity is, and then make sure that you state it up front with the people that you're working with. There's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
And you have to be realistic. You can't say I can do it all. There are people that can. I'm not one of them.
So kind of a final question here. If this podcast had 100,000 listeners today, what is the one message you want to promote, and what is your next passion project?
Well, the message I want to promote is, would just be like, we're all in this together, as fans of the sport, as people that work in the sport. This to me, motorcycling is my passion. And I don't engage in it every day, but I engage in something from the industry every day. And I just wish people that could stop being armchair, fans and whatnot, and just always, saying so and so said this, and so I'm not going to follow them anymore. Or, just calm down. It's a sport, just like any other sport, and let's just enjoy it together. And I think that's something like the series on Netflix, F1 Drive to Survive, has really highlighted. It's really brought that community closer together, and it's even brought people from outside the community into F1. The best thing they've ever done. And in terms of my next passion project, there's actually something that was kind of bouncing around last year. I can't really say too much about it because we're still in talks, but it's a flat track related. And it's kind of going back into the history, which is something that was interesting for me because as a motorcycle fan, we say we're a motorcycle fan, but again, there's so many different genres of motorcycle. Right. And last year was my first year really getting to dive deep into flat track. And I walked into flat track going, it's just dudes going around in a circle. I mean, I work with some of these guys in camps, it's not impressive. I was so wrong. And It is extremely impressive. And then when you start digging into the history of the sport and you look at the people who really helped establish these things and what they were doing, it's crazy. And so I'm working on trying to get final approval for funding, and then hopefully we can make an announcement of what that will be probably by the end of the year, but who knows what's going on now. I was already supposed to start flying around by now, so we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's the age-old question of why can't Harley guys and sport bike guys get along? Why don't we wave at each other, right? We all have run on two wheels, and as far as I can tell, the throttle's on the right-hand side. It doesn't matter what bike you ride, right?
Yeah.
So I really hope that after coronavirus, we're gonna just wave at everybody.
Yeah, I hope so too. You see another bike? Yeah, you see another biker on the road. Who cares if whatever they're on? Just wave, man. Just we're all taking the same risks. Just enjoy it. There's something in it that's keeping us out of a car. That's a common thread. Start there, and then let's go on.
Yeah. All right. Is there any final parting message you'd like to relay before we let you go?
No, man. I think this was awesome, Eric. This was a cool experience.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for joining. I wish you well. Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to it.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Talk to you later. I know.
Bye.
Hey.